United States, there are numerous cases of people missing or ending up dead. Now, most of these cases happen in New York City or the tri-state area, and this is where our story takes us. Hello, I'm Brenna Victoria, and today I am going to be talking about the Lucchese family. Yes, that family, who just happens to be part of the 5 families of the American Mafia. So grab your coffee and tea, break out that blanket, and enjoy this raw and unedited video. Now you may be wondering, how did the Lucchese family start? Where did they come from? Well, here it is. They were one of the dominant organized crime families in the United States, in New York City, basically. The family originated in the 1920s, or should I say the early 1920s, with Gaetano Reina serving as boss up until his murder in 1930. It was then taken over by Tommy Gagliano during the Castella Marisi War, and led by him until his death in 1951. Known as the Gagliano crime family under Gagliano, they were peaceful and low-key, concentrating their criminal activities in the Bronx, Manhattan, and New Jersey. The next boss was Tommy Lucchese, who served as Gagliano's underboss for over 20 years, who turned the family around to become one of the most powerful families to sit on the commission. Lucchese teamed up with Gambino family boss Carlo Gambino to control organized crime in New York City. Lucchese had a stronghold on the garment industry in New York City and took control of many crime rackets for his crime family, I should say. When Lucchese died of a brain tumor in 1967, Carmine Tamunti controlled the family for a brief time. But then he was arrested in 1973 for funding a major heroin network and died 5 years later. Anthony Carello then gained control of the family. Carello was very secretive and soon became one of the most powerful members of the commission. In 1986, he was arrested and convicted in the famous commission case of 1986. For most of its history, the Lucchese family was reckoned as one of the most powerful and one of the most peaceful crime families in the nation. However, that changed when Carello named Victor Amuso as his successor, shortly before going to prison. Amuso later promoted one of his longtime partners, Anthony Queso, to underboss. Starting with the Windows case in 1986, they instituted one of the bloodiest reigns in the Mafia history, ordering virtually anyone who crossed them to be murdered. It is estimated that Queso himself had murdered between 30 to 40 people, and then has ordered over 100 murders during his reign. He was sentenced to 455 years in prison. Queso has also had authority over NYPD detectives Louis Apolito and Stephen Caracapia. Both carried out at least 8 murders for him. Amuso was arrested in 1991 and sentenced to life in prison. Several Lucchese wise guys, fearing for their lives, turned informant. The highest profile of these was acting boss Alfonso D'Arco, who became the first boss of the New York crime family to testify against the mob. This led to the arrest of the entire Lucchese family hierarchy, with Queso also becoming an informant. Testimony from these informants nearly destroyed the family, with as many as half of its members incarcerated. Amuso has continued to rule the family from prison. The early history of the Lucchese crime family can be traced to members of the Murillo gang based in East Harlem in the Bronx. Gaetano Tommy Reina would lead the Murillos around the time of World War I and created his own family based in East Harlem in the Bronx. As the family's leader, Reina avoided the Mafia Camorra War for control over New York City. He instead focused on controlling the ice business that was distributed into homes throughout New York City. During the early 1920s, Regna became a powerful Prohibition-era boss and aligned himself with Joseph Masseria, the most powerful Italian-American crime boss in New York City. Masseria soon became involved in the Castellammarese War, a vicious gang war with rival Sicilian boss Salvatore Maranzano. At this point, Masseria started demanding a share of Regna's criminal profits, prompting Regna to consider changing alliance to Maranzano. When Masseria learned of Regna's possible betrayal, he plotted with Regna Lieutenant Tommy Gagliano to kill him. On February 26, 1930, gunman Vito Ginovinzi murdered Regna outside his aunt's apartment. With Regna dead, Masseria bypassed Gagliano, who expected to take control of the Regna gang, and installed his underling Joseph Fat Joe Pinzolo as boss. Furious with this betrayal, Gagliano and Tommy Lucchese secretly defected to Maranzano. In September 1930, Lucchese lured Pinzolo to a Manhattan office building, where Pinzolo was murdered. With Masseria's murder on April 15, 1931, Maranzano held a meeting at the intersection of 187th and Washington Ave in the Bronx, proclaiming himself as a new Capo di Tutti Capi, or bosses of all bosses of the American Mafia. Maranzano outlined a peace plan to the Sicilian and Italian mafia leaders in the United States. There would go on to be 24 organizations or families throughout the country who would elect their own bosses. Maranzano also reorganized all the Italian-American gangs in New York City into 5 families to be headed by Lucky Luciano, Vincent Mangano, Joseph Pufacci, Gagliano, and himself. Gagliano was awarded the Regna organization with Lucchese as his underboss. However, Luciano and other mob members were not willing to serve under Maranzano. When Maranzano learned about Luciano's disaffection, he hired a gunman to kill him. However, in the year of 1931, in the month of September, Luciano struck first. Several Jewish assassins provided by Luciano associate Meyer Lansky murdered Mazzano in his office. Luciano now became the most powerful mob boss in New York. Now, because Luciano is now the most powerful mobster in New York, he did decide to keep the family structure that was created by Maranzano, but he removed bosses of bosses in favor of a ruling body, which then was now known as the Commission. The Commission's responsibility was basically to regulate the family affairs and resolve all differences between the family. The first Commission members included Luciano, Gagliano, Bonanno, Perfecci, Mangano, Chicago outfit boss Al Scarface Capone, and Buffalo family boss Stefano Magdino, with Luciano as chairman. Although the commission was technically a democratic institution, it was actually controlled by Luciano and his allies. Now, in the 30s and 40s, Gagliano and Lucchese led their families into profitable areas, trucking and clothing industries. In 1936, Luciano was sent to prison for pandering. And because he was now in prison, a rival alliance took control of the commission. The alliance of Mangano, Bonanno, Buffalo crime family boss Stefano Magaddino and Pufecci used their power to control the organized crime throughout America. The vulnerability that Gagliano realized he had was to carefully avoid opposing this new alliance. Gagliano was said to be a quiet man, made sure that he avoided the media and stayed off the streets. He was the kind of leader who preferred to pass his orders to the family through Lucchese and a few other close allies. In contrast, Lucchese was the public face of the family who carried out Gagliano's orders. At the Costa Nostra Havana Conference in Cuba, which took place in 1946, instead of Gagliano, it was Lucchese who attended on behalf of Gagliano. Gagliano kept such a low profile that virtually nothing is known about his activities in 1932. But even more confusing is that with those activities, they don't know if he died or retired in the years between 1951 and 1953. So that part is kind of sketchy, and it does make you wonder if he ended up dying quietly without, the mafia letting it be known. Now, this is where the Lucchese era comes in. After Gagliano's retirement or supposed death, Lucchese became boss and appointed Vincenzo Rao as his consigliere and Stefano Lascelle as his underboss. Lucchese continued with Gagliano's policies, making the now Lucchese family one of the most profitable families in New York. Lucchese could establish control over Teamsters union locals, workers' cooperatives, and trade associations, and rackets at the new Idlewild Airport. In Manhattan's Garment District, Lucchese was able to expand the family rackets and related trucking industry around New York City. Lucchese built close relations with many of New York's politicians, including mayors William O'Dwyer and Vincent Eppolicheri, and members of the judiciary, who aided the family on numerous occasions. Throughout this regime, Lucchese kept a low profile and saw to it that his men were all well taken care of. Okay, before I go on, what I want to say is that if this family was able to get close to very powerful politicians, especially those in New York, it really makes you wonder if the American mafia families have a say in how the United States run their government. I mean, if you look at it, the government is basically bought by the elite families of America, which is pretty damn stupid. But it really gives you that sense of wonder and frustration, and it gives you doubts or ideas of how the family runs things. When Lucchese became boss, he helped Vito Genovese and Carlo Gambino in their fights to take control of their families. The three bosses plotted to take over the Mafia Commissary by murdering family bosses Frank Costello and Albert Anastasia. In 1957, on May 2nd, Costello survived an assassination attempt and immediately decided to retire as boss in favor of Genovese. Then, on October 25th of 1957, the Gallo brothers from the Colombo family murdered Anastasia, allowing Gambino to become boss. Lucchese and Gambino started conspiring to remove their former ally Genovese. after the disastrous 1957 Appalachian meeting of mob leaders in upstate New York. Genovese lost a great deal of respect in the commission. In 1959, with the assistance of Luciano Castillo and Maya Lansky, Genovese was arrested. In 1962, Gambino's oldest son, Thomas, married Lucchese's daughter, Frances, to strengthen the Gambino-Lucchese alliance. But before that, Gambino and Lucchese assumed full control of the Mafia Commission. In 1960, they backed the Gallo brothers in their rebellion against Profaci family boss Joe Profaci. Gambino and Lucchese saw the war as a way to take over rackets from the distracted Profacis. After uncovering a plot by Joseph Bano to assassinate them, Lucchese and Gambino used the commission to strip Bonanno of his role as boss. And if you're wondering why I try to say it with an accent, it's because I'm trying to be respectful, but I'm sorry about that. Anyways, this power play started a war between the Bonanno family and served to strengthen both the Lucchese and Gambino families. Now, back to Gambino and Lucchese's children's marriage. After the children were married, Lucchese led a quiet, stable life until his death from a brain tumor on July 13, 1967. At the time of his death, he had not spent a day in jail in 44 years. Lucchese left his family in a very powerful position in New York City. The Lucchese family had a stronghold in East Harlem, the Bronx, and it consisted of 200 made members. Now remember, for those of you who don't really know about the Lucchese families or the organized families of American Mafia, these families do have their own family members as soldiers or underbosses or, captains, whatever. But a lot of these times, the soldiers were not even families at all. They were just like friends they made along the way, like so-called cousins along the way, or, they witnessed someone on the street doing something that looked like a mob hit, but it was actually, a way for them to survive. They were all welcomed into these families, but everybody knows that if you betrayed these families, you would be murdered. And now back to the story. Lucchese intended for longtime capo Anthony Coriello to succeed him. However, since he was in prison at the time, he named another longtime capo, Carmine Tramunti, as acting boss until Coriello's release. Now, as Tramunti as acting boss, he was involved in something called the French Connection. Now, as temporary boss, Carmine Mr. Gribbs Tramunti was in ill health, with boss in waiting Anthony Tony Ducks Coriello in prison. And Tramunti was expected to hold power until Coriello's release. Tramunti faced a number of criminal charges during his time as acting boss and was eventually convicted of financing a large heroin smuggling operation, aka the French Connection. This scheme was responsible for distributing millions upon millions of dollars in heroin along the East Coast during the early 70s. Before the French Connection trial, the NYPD was able to seize the heroin and store it in the NYPD property evidence storage room pending trial. In a brazen scheme, a criminal stole hundreds of kilograms of heroin worth $70 million, which in today's terms would be about maybe 100 million to maybe 200 million, if I'm correct. If not, I'm sorry. These criminals replaced those kilos of heroin with bags of flour. I just want to know why. They could have replaced it with, baby powder. Anyways, officers discovered the theft when they noticed insects eating the so-called heroin. The scope and depth of the scheme is still unknown, but officials suspect that the thieves had assistance from corrupt New York PD officers. Certain plotters received jail sentences, including Vincent Papa. He was later assassinated in the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary in Atlanta, Georgia. Virgil Alisi and Anthony Loria. In 1974, after Tremonti's incarceration, Coriello finally took charge of the family. This next part of the history of the Lucchese family is called Coriello and the Jaguar. Now, Coriello had this Jaguar that he loved. It was his baby, basically. And he was also known as Tony Dex, like I mentioned earlier. Now, in 1974, after Tremonti's incarceration, Coriello finally took control of the Lucchese family. Coriello came from the Queen's faction of the family. And, if you're wondering why he got Tony Dex, it's because he was able to duck criminal investigations until he was actually arrested. Coriello was a boss squarely in Lucchese's mold. Coriello had been heavily involved in labor racketeering, and of all things, he worked very closely with Jimmy Hoffa, the Teamsters president. It really does make you wonder if the crime family had something to do with Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance and death. Anyways, Hoffa was the Teamster president during the 1940s and 50s. The 1950s. Coriello also enjoyed close ties to the Painters and Decorators Union, the Conduit Workers Union, and the United Textile Workers Union. Coriello appointed Salvatore, a.k.a. Tom Mix Santoro, as the underboss and supervisor of all labor and construction racketeering operations in New York, and Christopher, a.k.a. Christy Tick Fonari, as the reputed consigliere. Anyways, the family prospered under Coriello's leadership, particularly in narcotics trafficking, labor racketeering, and major illegal gambling. Coriello never discussed business during sit-downs, fearing that the FBI was monitoring the conversations. Instead, he used the car, phone, and the Jaguar owned by his bodyguard and chauffeurs. Coriello was driven around New York while on the phone discussing business. Salvatore, Sal Avellino, and Anello Neil Magalore shifted as Coriello's chauffeurs during the 1970s and 80s. Coriello, a huge fan of the New Jersey faction of the family, reputedly inducted and promoted Anthony Tumac Ichitero and Michael Mad Dog Taxieta into the organization and put them in charge of the New Jersey crew, which reportedly controlled most of the loan sharking and illegal gambling operations in Newark, New Jersey at the time. In the early 1980s, the FBI finally managed to plant a bug in the Jaguar. The FBI recorded Coriello speaking at great length about mob affairs, including illegal gambling, labor racketeering, drug trafficking, and murder. Coriello was arrested and put on trial, along with all the heads of the 5 families at the time. That trial became known as the Mafia Commission Trial. On December 16, 1985, Gambino crime family boss Paul Castellano was murdered without commission approval. The Genovese and Lucchese family teamed up and plotted John Gotti's murder. The alliance had Gambino underboss Frank de Ciccio murdered but failed its attempt to kill Gotti. Coriello, Santoro, and Fornari were indicted in the Mafia Commission trial in 1986. As the trial wore on, Coriello realized that the entire Lucchese hierarchy was about to be decimated. Not only was it all but certain that he, Santoro, and Fornari would be convicted, but they would face sentences that at their age would all but assure they would die in prison. In the fall of 1986, Coriello chose Anthony Buddy Luongo as acting boss. However, Luongo disappeared in 1986. Coriello's ultimate choice was Vittorio Vic Amuso, the capo of Fornari's old crew. Allegedly, both Amuso and another longtime protege of Fornari's, Anthony Gaspipe Queso, were candidates for the job. Evidence suggests that Coriello wanted Casso, but Casso convinced him to select Amuso instead. Amuso officially became boss in January 1987 when Coriello, Santoro, and Fornari were sentenced to 100 years in prison. Amuso made Queso his underboss in 1989, allowing him to exert great influence over family decisions. Coriello and Santoro died in prison in 2000, while Fornari was released in 2014. During the 1980s, the Lucchese family underwent a period of great turmoil. Vittorio Vic Amuso and his fierce underboss Anthony Gaspipe Queso, the first members of the family's Brooklyn wing to hit the family, instituted one of the most violent reigns in American mafia history. Both men were heavily involved in labor racketeering, extortion, drug trafficking, and committed many murders. Amuso and Queso were strong rivals of the Gambino crime family boss John Gotti and strong allies of Genovese crime family boss Vincent Chin Gigante. They made their reputations earlier in 1986. Angry over the murder of Gambino boss Paul Castellano, Carrillo and Gigante conspired to murder Gotti. Coriello gave the contract to Amuso and Queso. On April 13, 1986, a car bombing killed Gambino underboss Frank de Ciccio, but missed Gotti. This assassination attempt sparked a long and confusing tension between these three crime families, with many deaths reported on all sides. Again, during the late 80s, Amuso began demanding 50% of the profits generated by the Jersey crew. New Jersey leaders Anthony Ichitaro and Michael Tachetta refused Amuso's demand. In retaliation, Amuso and Queso ordered the entire Jersey crew killed, the now infamous Whack Jersey Order. He summoned them to a meeting in Brooklyn. Fearful for their lives, all the Jersey crew members skipped the meeting and went into hiding. Tachetta and Arcicchio were later put on trial in 1990 as both Amuso and Queso were implicated in a case involving the fitting of thousands of windows in New York at overinflated prices. And the pair went into hiding the same year, naming Alfonso Little Al D'Arco as acting boss. For the next few years, Amuso and Queso ruled the family from afar and ordered the executions of anyone they deemed troublesome. Either they were considered rivals or potential informants. All of this convinced many Lucchese wise guys that Amuso and Queso were no longer acting or thinking rationally. What followed next was a series of botched hits on family members suspected of being informants. These hits ironically caused several family members to actually turn informant. Amuso ordered the slaying of Capio Peter Fat Pete Chido, who along with Queso was in charge of the Windows case operation. Fat Pete sadly was shot 12 times, but still, he survived. After Amuso ordered hits on Chido's wife and sister in violation of long-standing rules against women being harmed, Chido ended up turning state's evidence and provided the entire Windows operation that eventually controlled $150 million in window replacements that were sold in New York City alone. As Amuso also sanctioned the hit on Anthony Achitoro, who was on trial in 1990, he also cooperated with the government. The prosecution was so high that it even included acting boss Diarco. After the failed hit of Chido, Amuso, who was so furious about it, set up Diarco to be killed at a Manhattan hotel. Well, that didn't go as planned either. The hit became undone after Diarco noticed a man hiding a gun in his shirt. While the man wasn't looking, Diarco slipped into the bathroom. And Diarco was smart enough to realize that this was a classic setup for a hit. He fled for his life and turned himself over to the authorities to spare him and his family from Amuso and Casio and their increasingly erratic demands. He was the first boss of a New York crime family, acting or otherwise, to become an informant. It was reported that Casio, I keep messing up his name, I'm so sorry, Casso and his reputed consigliere, Frank Lastriano, and Brooklyn faction leaders George Zappola, George Conte, Frank Bones Papagini, and Frank Ganoa conspired to murder Stephen Wonderboy Crea, Camuso's acting underboss of the Bronx, as well as Gambino crime family acting boss John Jr. Gotti, son of imprisoned John Gotti, along with members of the Genovese crime family once again. But due to massive indictments, none of those plots were ever carried out, or committed, I should say. In 1991, on July 29th, law enforcement were finally able to capture Amuso, who was in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and on the 19th of January in 1993, Queso was captured in Mount Olive, New Jersey. Amuso steadfastly refused all offers from the government to make a deal and become a government witness. He was convicted on all charges in 1992 and sentenced to life in prison. Believing that Queso had tipped off the FBI in hopes of taking over the family, Amuso removed Queso as underboss and declared him an outcast. Facing the prospect of spending the rest of his life in prison, Queso agreed to a deal on March 1st, 1994. It was there and then that he started revealing the family secrets. One of the biggest secrets was that the two New York Police Department detectives, Louis Eppolito and Stephen Carcappa, had been on Queso's payroll. For years, Eppolito and Carcappa had provided Queso with sensitive police information, which Amuso was able to use as a bribe to anyone who tried to back out. But anyways, that information, Queso was able to use it as hits. So, like, if he wanted to hit on a certain person that the detectives had provided him information on, he would order their hit. Casio related how Eppolito and Queso Oh my goodness. Casso related how Ippolito and Caracapia on Christmas Day 1986 murdered an innocent Brooklyn man who had the same name as a suspected government informant. Casso told the government that in 1992, Lucchese hitmen tried to kill the sister of another suspected informant, violating the alleged mafia rule barring violence against family members. However, prosecutors tore up the deal in 1998 after accusing Casso of lying about other mob turncoats and bribing guards, among other things. As a result, they ended up recommending no leniency for Casso at his sentencing, and he was sentenced to 13 consecutive terms of life in prison. After he was sentenced to prison, Joseph Little Joe DeFede became acting boss. Throughout the mid-1990s, Amuso continued to control the family from prison. DeFede, who supervised the powerful garment district racket, reportedly earned more than $40,000 to $60,000 a month. DeFede placed Stephen Crea in charge of the family's labor and construction racketeering operations. Crea increased the Lucchese family earnings from these rackets between $300,000 to $500,000 every year. But as law enforcement in the U.S. kept pressuring the organized crime activities in New York, DeFede was arrested and indicted on 9 counts of racketeering in 1998. DeFede pled guilty to charges and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Amuso, after finding out that DeFede pled guilty, was so angry that he promoted Crea as new acting boss. Stephen Wonderboy Crea's success with the labor and construction rackets convinced Amuso that DeFede had been previously skimming off these profits. In late 1999, Amuso placed a contract on DeFede's life. On September 6, 2000, Crea and several other Lucchese family members were arrested and jailed on extortion charges, mostly to the supervising of the construction sites with various capos Dominic Trusillo and Joseph Tangora. After Crea's imprisonment, the Consigliere Louis Lubagos Dadon took control of the family. However, Dadon's tenure was short-lived. After his release from prison, the scared DeFede became a government witness and helped the government convict Dadon of murder and conspiracy. Dadon's conviction was also helped by the testimony of Alfonso Di Arco in September 2004. Now, all of the FBI and other law enforcement agencies' attention turned to the detectives, or as they call them, mafia cops. As you remember, Ippolito and Caracapia worked as hitmen and informants for Queso during the 80s and early 90s. Combined, both of them spent much of their 44 years with the NYPD committing murders and leaking confidential information to the Lucchese family. Between 1986 and 1990, Ippolito and Caracapia participated in 8 murders and ended up receiving $375,000 from Queso in bribes and payments for murder contracts. Queso had used Caracapia and Ippolito to pressure the Gambino crime family by murdering several of their members. This is because Queso, along with the imprisoned Amuso and Genovese crime family boss Vincent Gigante, wanted their rival John Gotti out of the way. Caracapia and Ippolito are now seen as the main source of tension between these 3 families during the late 1980s and early 1990s. Mobster James Heidel was kidnapped by these 2 detectives, who they forced into their car trunk and delivered him to Queso for torture and murder. Of that result, Heidel's body has never been found. The two detectives also shot Bruno Facciolo, who was found in Brooklyn in the trunk of a car with a canary in his mouth. Oh, that poor bird. Anyways, after pulling Gambino crime family captain Edward Eddie Lino for a routine traffic stop, the detectives murdered him on the expressway in his Mercedes-Benz. In 2006 of April, Ippolito and Caracapia were convicted of murdering Heidel, Nicholas Guido, John Otto Heidel, and John Doe, as well as Anthony Di Lapo, Facicillo, Lino, and Bartholomew Borriello on the cases of Casso and the Lucchese family. They were sentenced to life imprisonment. With the arrest of acting boss Louis Dayton in 2003, imprisoned boss Vic Amuso put a 3-man ruling panel to run the family. The panel consisted of Capos Anillo Magliore, Joseph Di Napoli, and Matthew Madonna, who bought the family's power back into the Bronx. In April 2004, a New York Post article stated that the Lucchese family consisted of about 9 capos and 82 soldiers. In March 2009, an article at the New York Post stated that the Lucchese family consisted of approximately 100 made members. 2 members of the panel, Joseph Di Napoli and Matthew Madonna, were arrested on December 18, 2007, along with New Jersey fraction capo Ralph V. Perna. Also arrested with them was soldier Nicodemus Scarfo Jr. and others. The arrested came after New Jersey law enforcement agencies revealed that through investigation Operation Heat, the New Jersey fraction controlled a $2.2 billion illegal gambling, money laundering, and racketeering ring based in New Jersey and Costa Rica. That estimate has now gone up to about $10.10 billion, and what would be $10.10 billion today. On October 1st, 2009, the Lucchese family was hit with 2 separate indictments, charging 49 members and associates with bribery and racketeering. In the first indictment, 29 members and associates of the Lucchese family were murdered. The indicted charged Joseph Di Napoli, Matthew Madonna, and acting capio Anthony Croce with running operations that nearly grossed $400 million from illegal gambling, loan sharking, gun trafficking, bribery, and extortion. In the second indictment obtained from investigation Operation Open House, 12 more Lucchese members were charged with the bribery. The indictment charged acting capio Andrew DeSimone and other mobsters with bribing New York Police Department detective and sergeant posing as crooked cops to protect illegal parlors. On November 18th, 2009, family members were indicted under Operation Night Gallery. Capo Anthony Croce, soldier Joseph DeTello, and his brother Frank DeTello were charged with loan sharking and bookmaking from the bar Night Gallery on Staten Island. After the ruling panel was disbanded in 2009, Matthew Madonna took over as acting boss and Joseph Di Napoli became the new consigliere. In late 2009, because of the parole restrictions had expired, a longtime boss, Stephen Crea, and he was able to rejoin the family's leadership again. The FBI went on to arrest 29 members and associates of the Lucchese, and Gambino crime families on January 16, 2013. The charges were of racketeering related to their involvement in carding companies in Westchester County, Rockland County, Nassau County in New York, and Bergen County and Passaic County in New Jersey. Members and associates of the Genovese, Lucchese, and Gambino crime families controlled waste disposal businesses by dictating which companies would pick up trash at certain locations and extorting protection payments, preventing further extortion from other mobsters. The New York FBI office reduced the number of agents focusing on investigating the five crime families to 36 agents that were divided into 2 squads. In the past, the FBI had a separate squad for 10 to 20 agents investigating each family. Currently, the FBI has Squad C5, which was one time solely investigating the Genovese family, but will now also be investigating the Bonanno and Colombo families, and Squad C16, which previously investigated just the Gambino family, will now be investigating the Lucchese family as well. And the reduced number of agents took place in June 2013. On May 31st, 2017, since then, there really hasn't been any news of the family at all in newspapers or, no news broadcasting. So there's that long time bracket in between from 2013 to 2017 where we don't know what went on, what happened, what's going on. So on May 31st, 2017, 19 members and associates of the Lucchese family were indicted and charged by the FBI and New York Police Department with racketeering, assault, attempted murder, armed robbery, murder, firearms, fraud, witness tampering, money laundering, illegal gambling, narcotics, and contraband cigarettes trafficking offenses, which dated back to at least 2000. Members of the Lucchese administration, Matthew Madonna, Stephen Crea, and Joseph Di Napoli, were amongst the accused. An associate of the Lucchese named Terrence Caldwell and a soldier by the name of Christopher Londonino were accused of participating in the shooting and murder of Michael Meldich, a former leader of the East Harlem Purple Gang and Lucchese Bronx-based hitman, on November 15, 2013. Caldwell was already in custody for the May 29, 2013 attempted murder of Bonanno crime family soldier Enzo Stagno, who was shot in the chest in East Harlem, Manhattan. In late 2012, Crea ordered Vincent Bruno and soldier Paul Casino to murder a Bonanno associate who disrespected him. The 2 men went to his home with guns, however, but the contract was not carried out. According to the FBI, Crea gave his approval in October 2016 to Joseph Datello to murder an informant in New Hampshire, but he was unsuccessful in finding the informer. Datello himself was accused of operating a drug smuggling ring from South Africa into the United States with other Lucchese mobsters. There was 5 kilos of cocaine that came in, more than 1 kilo of heroin, and over 1,000 kilograms of marijuana allegedly brought into the country. Crea was personally charged with mail and wire fraud in connection with the skimming operation involving the construction of a New York hospital. Originally, all but 2 of the defendants faced the death penalty or life in prison. However, in May 2018, the U.S. Attorney's Office announced that they would not seek the death penalty on Crea, Madonna, Landino, Crea Jr., and Caldwell. On January 4th, 2019, Joseph Datello received a 14-year prison sentence after pleading guilty to conspiracy to commit racketeering, including the attempted murder of the witness, narcotics trafficking, and collecting debts through the threat of violence on September 24, 2018. Junior Crea Jr. pleaded guilty to racketeering and murder conspiracy charges and was later sentenced to 13 years of prison. He had pleaded guilty on August 20th, 2019. In November 2019, on the 15th, Madonna, Crea, Landino, and Caldwell were convicted in White Plains Federal Court for the murder of Michael Meldish and for executing the murder of Michael Meldish. On July 27, 2020, Madonna, Landino, and Caldwell were sentenced to life in prison for the Meldish murder. On August 27th, Crea was sentenced to life in prison along with a $400,000 fine and the forfeit of $1 million. Although the Lucchese family is still up and going, Victor Musso remains the official boss, even though he's been sentenced to life in prison. On March 27, 2018, Lucchese crime family soldier Dominic Capelli and 9 associates were arrested as part of Operation The Vig Is Up. Attorney General Eric T. Schneiderman announced that it was the biggest loan sharking case investigated by the United States Attorney General Office. Over 47 people were identified as loan sharking victims. The victims were allegedly charged exorbitant weekly loan rates averaging over 200% per year, effectively creating a high-cost debt trap for all individuals taking out such loans. The accused were alleged to have operated out of New Rochelle, New York, and the Bronx. It was also said that the defendants ran an illegal bookmaking operation which generated over $1.5 million in annual wagers. In April 2018, there was a separate indictment for Lucchese soldier Anthony Grado and associate Lawrence Fat Larry Teranzi. They were arrested and accused of forcing a doctor to prescribe them over 2,300,000 oxycodone pills in order to sell them from 2011 through 2013. It was noted that Grado ordered one of his peers to stab the unidentified Brooklyn-based doctor during the visit, who complied with the task. Grado was recorded threatening the doctor, "If the prescriptions go into anybody's hands beside mine, I'll put a bullet right in your head." Both men pleaded guilty on April 5th, 2018. The investigations were conducted by a wiretap surveillance cameras, car bugs, and undercover officers, as well as hidden cameras, and cost over $1 million. Grado was sentenced to 12 years imprisonment and Teranzi to over 3 years. Associate Vincent Zito was reportedly murdered at his home in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn in October 2018. He was found to have been shot twice, and a handgun was recovered by his body. Zito was allegedly a loan shark. His brother Anthony Zito was jailed for extortion in 1971, and he was a well-known associate of current Lucchese boss Victor Musso. Let's see. In May 2019, the government witness and former Lucchese soldier John Peninzi was able to testify in the trial against Eugene Castell and revealed the current leadership of the crime family. Peninzi testified that in 2017, imprisoned for life boss Victor Musso sent a letter to underboss Stephen Crea, which stated that Brooklyn-based mobster Michael Big Mike DeSantis would take over as acting boss, replacing Bronx-based Matthew Madonna. In the testimony, Peninzi stated that if the Bronx faction refused to step aside, imprisoned boss Musso had approved of the hit list that included a captain and several members of the Bronx faction. During his testimony, he revealed that the Lucchese family operates with a total of 7 crews. 2 in the Bronx, 2 on Long Island, 1 in Manhattan, 1 in New Jersey, and John Castellucci's Brooklyn crew, formerly Musso Cassio's old crew, which is now based in Tottenville section of Staten Island. Law enforcement agents have stated that Brooklyn-based mobster Patrick "Patty" Delarusso is the new acting underboss, and that the Bronx base monster Andrew DeSimone is the new Consigliere. Since then, there has been no more updated news of the Lucchese family. And I'm very sorry to the victims of those families. And I hope now you guys have justice. And I hope in some way you're able to get money back from these families. Or the courts were able to help you guys get money back from the crime families. But anyways, that's the end of my video for today. If you like the video and my little narrations in between, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more notifications of upcoming or new videos that have been posted. Thank you, and have a very good day, very good night, or evening, or morning, actually, depending on where you're watching this from. Until then, bye!